The Mind Unlocked, 2026's Neural Interface Revolution.
Hello everyone, you are on the Digital Fresh channel.
Imagine a world where a single, focused thought is all it takes to send a message to a loved one, to compose a symphony, or to navigate the boundless libraries of human knowledge with nothing more than the power of your own mind. A world where the barrier between intention and action dissolves into thin air, leaving behind only the pure, unadulterated expression of human will. And this is not the opening scene of a science fiction epic set in some distant, unimaginable future, but rather the stark, electrifying reality that is unfolding before our very eyes as we stand on the precipice of the year 2026, a pivotal moment in human history where the final, most intimate frontier of our own biology is being mapped, understood, and ultimately unlocked. For centuries, the human brain has been the ultimate enigma, a 3-pound universe of unparalleled complexity, its 86 billion neurons firing in patterns so intricate that they create everything from the simplest reflex to the most profound work of art. And for just as long, humanity has dreamed of a direct line of communication with this organ, a way to bypass the slow, error-prone intermediaries of muscle and speech to create a seamless union between thought and machine, a dream that has flirted with impossibility for generations, confined to the pages of speculative fiction and the cautious, incremental experiments of neuroscientists in sterile laboratories. But now, as the first weeks of 2026 unfold, that dream is no longer a whisper on the wind. It has become a deafening roar, a revolution that is not coming, but is already here, transforming lives, redefining ability, and forcing us to confront fundamental questions about who we are, what we can become, and the very nature of our consciousness, in a world where our innermost thoughts can be read, interpreted, and even, potentially, written to by an external device. A revolution that is being driven not by a single monolithic corporation, but by a vibrant, fiercely competitive ecosystem of brilliant minds and daring entrepreneurs, each pushing the boundaries of what is possible with a blend of audacious vision and meticulous engineering that would have seemed like pure magic only a decade ago. And to truly grasp the magnitude of this shift, we must first understand the quiet, determined pioneers who have been laying the groundwork for this revolution for years, not in garages, but in operating rooms and clinical trial centers around the globe, building bridges across the chasms of paralysis and neurological disease, one neuron at a time. Long before the flashy headlines and the viral videos, the real story of the neural interface revolution began with a profound act of compassion, a desire to restore a fundamental human dignity that had been stolen by illness or accident, the simple, profound ability to communicate. And at the heart of this humanitarian effort stands a device that sounds more like a piece of plumbing than a medical marvel, the Stentrode. A name that is a portmanteau of stent and electrode, a technology that represents a brilliant act of medical repurposing, taking the well-established, minimally invasive procedure of inserting a stent into a blood vessel and transforming it into a revolutionary pathway to the brain, a concept so elegant in its simplicity that it bypasses the most daunting hurdle of all previous brain-computer interface attempts, the need for open brain surgery, a procedure fraught with risk and reserved only for the most desperate cases. But the Stentrode, developed by the company Synchron and championed by the visionary neurologist Dr. Tom Oxley, navigates the body's vascular highway, traveling through the jugular vein and into the superior sagittal sinus, a large vein that runs along the top of the brain, where it unfurls itself against the wall, its tiny golden electrodes pressing gently against the brain tissue from the inside of the blood vessel, listening to the electrical symphony of the motor cortex, the part of the brain that plans movement, and translating those silent intentions into digital commands that can be beamed wirelessly to a computer. And the proof of this concept is not theoretical, it is etched in the lived experiences of remarkable individuals like Philip O'Keefe, a man living with the progressive and devastating effects of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, a condition that had robbed him of the ability to move or speak, trapping a vibrant, intelligent mind inside a body that no longer obeyed its commands, until he became one of the first participants in Synchron's pioneering Switch clinical trial, where for the first time in years, he was able to reconnect with the world, not by flexing a muscle, but by simply imagining the movement of his hand, a thought that the Stentrode captured and translated into a cursor moving across a screen, allowing him to compose an email, to browse the internet, and in a moment that resonated across the scientific community, to send a tweet into the digital ether that read, "Hello world." A simple phrase that carried the weight of a new era, a declaration of independence for the mind. And the data from these early trials was not just heartwarming, it was clinically robust, demonstrating an average typing speed of 14 to 20 characters per minute with an astonishing click accuracy of over 90%. And most critically, across all patients monitored for a full year, there were no device-related serious adverse events that led to disability or death, a safety profile that is nothing short of extraordinary for a device that interfaces directly with the human brain, paving the way for Synchron's next, even more ambitious step.
A pivotal trial that began in late 2025, backed by a massive $200 million funding round, aiming to move this technology from a scientific wonder to a widely available medical treatment, a beacon of hope for millions living with severe paralysis who now see a future where their thoughts are no longer prisoners, but powerful tools for re-engaging with the world. While Synchron was charting a cautious endovascular course to the brain, a different kind of energy was crackling on the other side of the Pacific, a force driven by the restless ambition of a man who has made a career of turning science fiction into science fact. And if the Stentrode represents the quiet, steady hand of a surgeon, then Neuralink, the company founded by Elon Musk, is the lightning bolt. A project that, from its inception, promised not just to restore lost function, but to elevate human capability to unprecedented heights. A promise that was met with equal parts awe and skepticism, with critics pointing to the immense technical challenges and the company's aggressive timelines that seemed almost designed to be missed, until they weren't. As the year 2024 gave way to 2025, when Neuralink began its PRIME study, a first-in-human early feasibility study, not in some distant future, but in the present at the Barrow Neurological Institute in Phoenix, Arizona, and the world watched with bated breath as the first patient, a young man named Nolan Arbaugh, a vibrant 29-year-old whose life had been irrevocably altered by a tragic diving accident that left him quadriplegic, volunteered to become the first human to receive the Neuralink N1 implant, a tiny coin-sized device that, unlike the Stentrode, is placed directly onto the surface of the brain through a small robotically assisted craniotomy, a procedure designed for maximum precision and minimal trauma. And the results, which began to trickle out in the following months, were nothing short of astonishing, shattering preconceived notions about the limitations of such technology, as Nolan, with a focused thought, was able to move a cursor on a screen with a speed and accuracy that far exceeded the capabilities of any previous brain-computer interface, allowing him to play chess, to create digital art, and to engage in online communities with a fluidity and independence that he had not experienced in over a decade, a level of control so intuitive that he described it not as using a tool, but as simply extending his own will into the digital space, a sentiment that was powerfully echoed as Neuralink rapidly expanded its trials, launching the CAN PRIME study in Canada at the University Health Network and the GB PRIME study in the United Kingdom at the prestigious University College London hospitals, each new participant adding another layer of validation to the technology, transforming it from a singular, miraculous anecdote into a repeatable, scalable medical breakthrough. And Nolan's story did not end with regained digital access.
It became a story of profound personal renaissance as he returned to his studies, began building his own business, and spoke openly about how the implant had given him back a sense of agency and identity that had been eroded by years of dependence. A powerful testament to the idea that these devices are not merely prosthetics for the body, but prosthetics for the self,
restoring not just movement, but the fundamental human right to pursue one's own potential, a right that was now being secured for dozens of participants across 3 continents, their collective successes silencing the doubters and forcing the entire world to take a serious, sober look at a future where the line between biology and technology is rendered beautifully, usefully obsolete. As these groundbreaking medical applications were capturing headlines and transforming lives on a deeply personal level, a quieter but no less revolutionary movement was gathering momentum in the consumer market, a wave of technology designed not to repair but to enhance, to augment the capabilities of the perfectly healthy brain, a development that moved the conversation about neural interfaces from the rarefied air of clinical ethics into the bustling marketplace of everyday life. And the key to this democratization was a single critical word: non-invasive. A technological paradigm shift that discarded the need for surgery entirely, instead relying on sophisticated sensors that could be woven into comfortable headbands, sleek earbuds, or even integrated into the frames of augmented reality glasses. Devices that read the faint electrical whispers of the brain from the surface of the scalp using advanced electroencephalography, or EEG, a technology that had been around for decades but had been supercharged by the relentless progress in artificial intelligence and miniaturized computing, progress that allowed these new generation devices to filter out the cacophony of biological noise, eye blinks, muscle twitches, the rhythmic thump of the heart, to isolate and interpret the specific patterns of neural activity associated with intention, focus, and even simple commands. And the applications for this technology in the year 2026 were exploding across industries, from gaming, where players could control avatars and cast spells with a thought, creating a level of immersion that rendered traditional controllers quaint and clumsy, to the smart home, where a glance and a mental command could dim the lights, adjust the thermostat, or start the coffee brewing, to industrial settings, where factory workers could operate complex machinery or robots with enhanced safety and precision, their hands free to perform delicate physical tasks while their minds managed the overarching control systems. And one of the most intriguing and widely discussed products in this new consumer category was a system called Neuro Energizer, a digital program that promised to tap directly into the brain's own operating system using a proprietary blend of binaural beats and isochronic tones, a form of brainwave entrainment technology that uses precise audio frequencies to gently guide the brain's natural electrical rhythms into states associated with deep focus, creative flow, or restorative calm. A concept that moved far beyond the generic focus music of the past, offering a structured, scientifically informed approach to mental optimization that was as accessible as downloading an app, a harbinger of a future where cognitive enhancement is not a privilege of the few, but a tool available to all. A future where the human mind is not a static entity, but a dynamic system that can be tuned, calibrated, and optimized for peak performance, blurring the lines between therapy, wellness, and superhuman capability in a way that was both exhilarating and, for some, deeply unsettling. This exhilaration, however, is inevitably shadowed by a profound and necessary unease, a wave of ethical and philosophical questions that crash onto the shores of this new technological continent with every breakthrough announcement. Questions that are no longer the abstract musings of futurists, but urgent, practical concerns that demand our immediate attention. For if the brain is the final frontier, then who owns the map, and more importantly, who controls the territory? A concern that crystallizes around the terrifying yet increasingly plausible specter of brain hacking, a term that moves beyond the theft of passwords or financial data to a violation of the most intimate sanctuary of the self, our thoughts, our memories, our very sense of identity. A risk that is not hyperbolic, but grounded in the reality of how these systems work, as even the most secure consumer device creates a data stream, a digital fingerprint of your neural activity, a neural profile that could, in the hands of a malicious actor, be used for unprecedented forms of identity theft or blackmail. And the first human recipient of the Neuralink implant, Noland Arbaugh, himself voiced this chilling possibility when he speculated that if a hacker gained access to a system while he was connected to his computer, they could potentially control his cursor and access his most personal files, a scenario that transforms the concept of cybersecurity from a digital inconvenience into a direct threat to personal autonomy and mental privacy. A threat that is amplified by the write-in capability of the next generation of devices, neural interfaces that do not just read, but also stimulate, promising to restore lost senses or treat intractable neurological disorders, but simultaneously opening a door to the potential for external manipulation of our emotions, our decisions, or our perception of reality, raising the specter of a world where free will itself could be subject to technological interference.
A world where the distinction between a genuine thought and an artificially induced impulse becomes terrifyingly blurred. And these are not questions that can be answered in a corporate boardroom or a government committee alone. They require a global conversation, a societal consensus on what it means to be human, in an age where our minds can be both our greatest asset and our most vulnerable point of failure. A conversation that must happen now, before the technology outpaces our wisdom, before the tools we build to liberate the mind become the instruments of its subtle, insidious subjugation. And so, as we stand here in the early days of January in the year 2026, we find ourselves at a crossroads of cosmic significance, peering into a future that is being written not in ink, but in neural code. A future that holds the breathtaking promise of healing the incurable, of amplifying human potential beyond our wildest dreams, of creating a symbiosis between biology and machine that could propel our species to new heights of understanding and achievement. But this same future also holds a mirror to our deepest fears, a reflection of our capacity for misuse, for control, for turning a tool of liberation into a chain of a different, more subtle kind. And the choice of which path we take is not predetermined. It is not written in the stars or dictated by the laws of physics, but resides entirely within us, within the collective will of humanity to navigate this uncharted territory with wisdom, with compassion, and with an unwavering commitment to the principles of human dignity and autonomy. For the revolution of the unlocked mind is not a distant event on the horizon. It is unfolding in real time, in operating rooms, in research labs, and now even in our own living rooms. And its ultimate legacy will be determined not by the brilliance of the engineers who built the devices, but by the wisdom of the society that chooses how to use them. So, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you simply be a spectator to this historic shift, or will you become an active participant in the conversation? Will you seek to understand the science, to grapple with the ethics, to demand transparency and security from the developers who hold the keys to our inner worlds? Will you commit to using these powerful new tools not for mere distraction, but for genuine growth, for learning, for connection, for the betterment of the human condition? The neural interface revolution is here. The mind is being unlocked, and the next chapter of the human story is waiting for us to write it, one conscious, deliberate, and courageous thought at a time.
I hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell.